The warning klaxons had been silenced for 3 hours. That alone was remarkable. Every military outpost on the Kellan 7 research station had been on high alert since the moment Raxorthorn broke through the reinforced containment bay, a creature that the Galactic Zoological Council had classified as a Tier 9 apex predator, the highest category of biological threat recognized across 47 sentient civilizations. Raxorthorn was not supposed to be alive. The beast stood 11 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in obsidian black scales that shimmered with bioluminescent veins of deep crimson and violet. For massive limbs, each ending in hooked talons capable of shearing through reinforced duranium plating. 3 rows of serrated teeth. Eyes like twin dying suns, amber burning around a black void. His roar had shattered the viewport glass from 50 meters away. His presence alone triggered primal fear responses in every species that encountered him. Virati warriors, beings who crossed light years to court death as sport, had reportedly broken ranks and fled at the sight of him. 3 Virati were hospitalized. 2 Centaurian security officers had locked themselves in a supply closet and refused to come out. The station commander, a seasoned Felian named Admiral Voss, had ordered full evacuation of Sector 7 and was now drafting a memo recommending orbital bombardment. And then someone had noticed Ethan Cross walking toward the beast. Who authorized that human to? Admiral Voss started. No one, Lieutenant Sarah replied quietly, watching the security feed with wide eyes. He went on his own. On the screen, Ethan Cross moved with a slowness that looked almost deliberate, not the frozen slowness of fear, but the intentional, measured pace of someone who had done this before. He was 34 years old, medium height, wearing a standard-issue tan field jacket. No armor. No weapon drawn. He had a datapad tucked under one arm and, inexplicably, what appeared to be a small cloth wrapped around something in his left hand. Raxorthorn heard him coming. The beast swung his massive head toward the corridor entrance. The bioluminescent patterns along his scales flared, bright crimson, a threat display. His tail swept across the floor, toppling a row of storage units like toys. A low sound built in his chest, something between a subsonic rumble and the first warning note of a continental earthquake. Every sensor in the room screamed danger. Ethan stopped walking. He stood at the threshold of Sector 7, maybe 20 meters from the creature, and he sat down. Not kneeled. Not crouched in a defensive posture. He folded his legs beneath him, placed the datapad aside, and sat on the floor of the corridor like someone settling in for a long wait. Raxorthorn stared at him. The rumbling continued. The threat display intensified. Those amber void eyes locked onto this tiny, unarmored, apparently suicidal creature that had just sat down in front of him. And Ethan Cross began to talk. "You're in pain," he said. Not loudly. Softly. The way a person speaks when they're not trying to command anything, just sharing an observation with the universe. Your left rear leg. The way you're favoring it. The scales around the ankle joint are raised and discolored. That's inflammation. That's been hurting you for a while, hasn't it? In the command center, Admiral Voss blinked. What is he doing? Voss said. Nobody answered, because nobody knew. On the screen, Raxorthorn had not moved. The rumble had not stopped. But the flaring of his threat display had, almost imperceptibly, reduced. "I know you didn't want to be here," Ethan continued, his voice calm and unhurried. "They brought you across 17 light years. Put you in a box that smelled like nothing you recognized. Ran tests. Took samples. Wouldn't let you move properly." He paused. "I'd have broken walls too." The beast's head lowered, not in submission, but in the slow, cautious way of a creature recalibrating a threat assessment. Ethan unwrapped the cloth in his left hand. Inside was a dense, dark piece of something that steamed faintly. He set it on the floor in front of him and slid it forward with one hand, not throwing it, not making any sudden motion. Just placing it in the space between them. Fermented grappa root, he said. From Valoni's prime. Your home system has a plant that's chemically almost identical. I know it's not the same. But I figured the smell might be close. Raxorthorn's nostrils flared. The rumble shifted in pitch. In the command center, Sarah had completely forgotten she was supposed to be logging incident reports. She was gripping the edge of the console with both hands, watching. Ethan did not move for the next 40 minutes. He talked, sometimes about practical things, like what the station's medical team could do for the ankle injury if given the chance. Sometimes about stranger things. He talked about a ranch in Montana where he'd grown up, about the first time he'd been thrown from a horse, about learning that the animal hadn't hated him, it had simply been scared. He talked about a Drac-3 razor wing he'd once spent 6 days with in an observation blind on Museti 4, how the creature had eventually stopped treating him as a threat, and how that day had felt like the greatest conversation he'd ever had. Most beings think, he said at one point, his voice quiet and matter-of-fact, that the only way to deal with something dangerous is to dominate it or destroy it. My species spent a long time thinking that too. He glanced up at those amber-void eyes, which had not looked away from him in 40 minutes. We still have that instinct. But we also have this other thing. This stubborn, ridiculous thing where we walk toward what scares us because we want to understand it. Raxorthorn moved. One massive limb shifted forward, one slow, enormous step. Then another. The bioluminescent veins along his scales had shifted color. The hostile crimson was dimming. Underneath it, barely visible, threads of a deep blue-green were emerging, a color the station's xenobiology database listed, in Raxorthorn's species, as cautious curiosity. Ethan stayed still. The beast stopped 6 feet in front of him. Up close, he was incomprehensibly large, his head alone was bigger than Ethan's entire torso. His breath came out in great warm gusts that smelled like iron and ozone. He lowered that massive head until one of those dying sun eyes was level with the human's face. Ethan looked back. He didn't flinch. There you are, he said softly. The station's medical team treated Raxorthorn's ankle injury over the following 4 days. Ethan Cross stayed in Sector 7 for most of that time, sleeping on a cot they wheeled in for him, eating his meals there, keeping the beast company while the pain gradually subsided. On the 5th day, Admiral Voss visited the observation window. The creature that had hospitalized 3 Virati warriors and fractured 6 centimeters of reinforced containment wall was lying on the floor of Sector 7. Ethan Cross was sitting near his flank, reading from a datapad, occasionally speaking quietly. Raxorthorn's bioluminescent veins pulsed a steady, rhythmic blue-green. How? Voss asked, when Ethan came out for his evening report. Ethan considered the question. He wasn't violent, Ethan said. He was afraid. And in pain. And completely alone in a place that made no sense to him. He set his datapad on the counter. Violent is usually what afraid looks like, when the thing that's afraid is large enough. That creature has a kill record across 4 species, Voss said. In situations where he was cornered or threatened. Ethan shrugged, not dismissively, but the shrug of someone who had genuinely thought about this and arrived somewhere. So do humans, historically. Didn't stop other humans from figuring out how to talk to us. Voss was quiet for a long moment. The Council's recommendation was orbital bombardment, she said. I know. You could have died. Ethan Cross picked up his datapad. Through the observation window, Raxorthorn lifted his great head and looked toward the glass, those amber-void eyes finding the human silhouette with something that the xenobiology database was going to have a very hard time categorizing. Sure, Ethan said simply. But I didn't. He went back inside. The Galactic Zoological Council revised their Tier 9 classification protocols 6 months later. Buried in the amendment, in careful bureaucratic language, was an acknowledgement that prior risk assessments had failed to account for one variable. The footnote read, behavioral threat modeling across all tier classifications must now include consideration of potential human interlocutor involvement, as human de-escalation capacity has been demonstrated to exceed predictive threat modeling in 11 of the last 11 documented cases. 11 cases. Ethan Kross had apparently done this before. He would do it again.